Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Let's get started with a Trump update. Actually, before we get to that, I've got to make a quick announcement. We were going to have Representative Tim Burchett with us on with us tonight. Unfortunately, he had some congressional business that came up that he had to take care of, so we will try to get him in the future. I do have a guest, but I'm going to cover the stuff up front, and then we'll turn to our guest. Kathy Henders is with us tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about the whole Gaza garbage as far as the proposal for us to take over Gaza. So here's the Trump update, and I want to talk a little bit about primarily the DOGE. And so DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, I like to call it the Democrat operatives getting exposed, or Democrat operations getting exposed. And anyway, in any event, they're doing a good job. You can tell they're doing a good job because the liberals are freaking out. The Dems are freaking out about this. You know, they've already found all this money going to USAID, AID that shouldn't have gone to enemies, gone to garbage. And there's going to be more audits. The Pentagon is going to get audited. That ought to be interesting and probably infuriating when it's all said and done. I don't think there's any agency out there that's not going to be audited, and I doubt there'll be any agency that we find out there that's not going to be, at least involved with wasteful spending at a minimum. But these are things that have to happen. Hopefully, I'm sure eventually the Fed will get audited, I would think, and Department of Education, that's another one that certainly, it needs to be audited and then closed down. Let's hope that happens with the Department of Education. Now, a lot of the people they're really freaking out about this, all the Dems are freaking out, of course, and you hear about the Dems are saying, well, he's acting like a dictator, this is unconstitutional, so on and so forth. Well, first off, on the issue of constitutionality. Now, I'm not in favor of everything being done by executive orders, okay? And executive orders are only supposed to apply to the executive branch, the offices that he controls directly. And so a lot of this stuff is going to end up going to court, and we'll see how that turns out. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But on the whole charge of unconstitutional, number one, if it is an executive agency, if it falls under the presidency, he's the top guy. He does take an oath to uphold the Constitution. And if those agencies are doing things that are unconstitutional, oh, by the way, we have not had constitutional government in this country since at least the 1930s, starting with the New Deal and some before that. So this whole thing of unconstitutionality, if whatever organization is being audited, closed down, people are being fired, first thing to look up is the authority for that, is that something that's given to the federal government in Article 1, Section 8? Because if it's not a constitutional entity anyway. And as president, he should be shutting it down, or he should be auditing it, or he should be firing somebody. Okay? So, he has to uphold his oath. And like I say, we have a lot of unconstitutional things in our government. And if you think about it, probably 95% of what they do, and certainly a good percentage of our debt that I don't see how we're ever going to repay, are due to things that the federal government's not even authorized to do to begin with. Now, they're upset now because J.D. Vance, among others, has suggested that these judges don't have the authority to issue these injunctions, stopping Trump from what he's doing. A couple of things there. Everybody thinks we have three equal branches. You hear that your whole life. We got three equal branches. And then the other big lie you hear, and yes, I said lie, is that the Supreme Court is supposed to determine the constitutionality of everything. Well, you'll look in vain in the Constitution to find it where it says that the Supreme Court gets to decide what is constitutional. Now, they do decide cases and controversies. They do take an oath to uphold the Constitution. And obviously, if they think something is unconstitutional, they will say that. But if you look at our Constitution, they were not given the power to just strike things down left and right. They have opinions. They give opinions. It's up to the executive to enforce those opinions. If the executive believes those opinions are unconstitutional, is he supposed to go along with them? I don't think so. Because the courts fall under the Constitution as well. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And buying into this thing, and I know we bought into it for a long time, that, well, whatever the court says is the Constitution. No. That's why we're in the mess we're in, a big part of it. Now, the other thing is this. The courts, they don't control the purse. They don't control the sword. Executive controls the sword. The Congress controls the purse. The Congress can impeach the Supreme Court or members of the Supreme Court. More importantly, they can and they have restricted their appellate jurisdiction. They can restrict it. They can severely limit it. We don't have to have any, the Constitution only requires us to have a Supreme Court. The federal courts are allowed to be created by the Constitution, but the Congress creates the federal courts. They can shut one down. They can shut them all down and leave just the Supreme Court if they want. They can tell the federal courts that you can only deal with these types of issues. Or they could just take all of their appellate jurisdiction away. So this idea that we're supposed to bow to the court, that's not backed up by what's in the Constitution. And I encourage you to read Article 3, Section 2. You'll see for yourself that the federal government, the Congress can restrict the powers of the court, the appellate jurisdiction of the court. They can restrict it. They have done it in the past, and they should really consider doing that now. It's going to be a hard fight to get anything through. We have narrow majorities in the House and the Senate, and even with our majorities, a lot of those people are not trustworthy. But this idea that we were supposed to be ruled by 5-4 Supreme Court decisions is insanity, and it's part of why we're in the mess we're in. And actually, the truth is, executive presidencies and out-of-control judiciaries are the fault of Congress. They are the fault of Congress. And we have to hold them accountable. So that's something to keep in mind. You know, this idea that that an elected president can just be shut down from doing his job by the courts, that's not the way it was intended. We have a Congress that can impeach a president if it's needed. Now, we see how that's been abused by the Congress. But this whole idea of now we got to bow to the courts, no, that is definitely a problem. But keep in mind, look at whatever he's doing and ask yourself first before you complain or before you think about anything else, is what he's shutting down anything that's even constitutional? Is it supposed to even exist? If it's not even supposed to exist, if there's no authority for it in Article 1, Section 8, then he's upholding his oath. And encourage our congressmen to restrict the appellate jurisdiction of the courts. Their original jurisdiction deals with consulates, ambassadors, and issues between the federal government and state. That's their original jurisdiction. Everything else is appellate. So if they follow that, they could very easily put these courts in check by taking things, so having said that, go read it, look at it for yourself. It's under Article 3 of our Constitution. And next time the elections come around, That's maybe a question you want to ask your rep. Hey, are you going to get the court in check? Are you going to put them back to into their lane instead of letting them just do whatever they want and acting as if they are supposed to decide every important question in this country? So that's just something I wanted to bring up. I hope Trump continues to do what he's doing as far as exposing the Democrats, exposing the left, and actually some of the Republicans. I mean, I don't think Mitch McConnell is any better than any of the Democrats. He's worked with them to undermine us the whole time, from what I can tell. So now, there's one thing that President Trump has suggested that I think is a bad idea. And that's this idea that we're going to take over Gaza. That's not our fight. I don't think we need to be involved with Gaza in any way, shape, or form. If we were to have anything set up there at some point in time, all we would be targets of opportunity. So I'm totally against that. Now, recently in an interview, and I was going to ask him about it tonight, but he couldn't make it. When he comes on the show, I'll certainly talk to him about it. Representative Burchett made a suggestion made the comment that he would be okay if, assuming they could be vetted, which is a big assumption and a problematic assumption in itself, that we could take the Palestinians, which I consider them the Hamasistinians, into our country. And he said, even into Tennessee, because he said that he knows that we already have some Palestinians in Knoxville and they're fine people. I think that's a bigger mistake than getting involved with Gaza. I don't think that would turn out very well for us. And I hope that doesn't happen. Like I say, if I get him on the show, we'll definitely talk about that. But here to talk about that proposal and the idea that we could vet people from Gaza, or that they would make good Americans and that there wouldn't be any issues. We have Kathy Henners with us from Daily Roll Call. Kathy, thank you for being on with us. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay, Dave. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you, especially such short notice.
I've got a lot to say about this, but one thing too, going back to what Mr. Burchett had said, was talking about a litmus test.
Right.
And so I guess, you kind of have to wonder what that would look like, because we know the vetting process of the majority of Middle Easterners that come to this country. You have to have something to vet them against. And in a lot of these countries, there isn't a system in place to do just that. So that's always been a pet peeve of mine to hear them saying, especially during Obama's reign. They talked about the vetting process and how good it was, and they were going to use biometrics and all these things. But, when you're talking about these countries, third world countries in particular, and not, of course, the whole Middle East isn't third world, but they still don't have the systems in place to be able to convince us that there is nothing in the background or, the pedigree of these people that are coming to our country. And so that's the first problem. But then what is a litmus test? I mean, how do you test people, to see whether they're going to make good Americans or not? Because as we know, in the Islamic religion, there's something called taqiyya, which is, it's okay to lie. As a matter of fact, it is
encouraged.
It is an obligation to lie if you feel that this is something that the enemy is pursuing you. So I don't think that's a very good idea. And, in this time of turmoil, we've got so much anti-Jew, anti-American sentiment already coming from the Palestinians that are here in America. I think the last thing our elected officials should be even considering is relocating more to Tennessee, or any state for that matter.
Right.
So I think that there's a big disconnect between, our elected officials and this topic, when they know, if they don't know, that their own constituents have the answers and the information to search them out and look to see what information we can provide with them to maybe school them and tell them that, this is what we have here and this is a problem. Yeah. Not long ago, we witnessed Palestinian protests in D.C. and in New York City and a lot of the other larger cities where they were flying the Palestinian flag and the flag of Hamas, but yet they were burning the American flag. So I can't just imagine that we would even be thinking of something like this.
Well, with everything going on right now, I think our doors should pretty much be closed to anybody and everybody. And something else that Trump talked about in his first term was, and they called it the Muslim ban, and he said that it was a ban on terror-prone countries. Well, to me, most of your Muslim countries are terror-prone. All right, so, but I think that's a good idea. I think we should have a ban on those countries, bring in their people. We don't need them here. Right now, we don't need anybody, okay? We need to get rid of all the excess we have from everywhere before we think about taking anybody in. But that is the last population. And as far as the Palestinians go, Hamasistinians, I think the only two populations that would be worse would be to bring more Afghanis over here that they, I know they said they vetted them, but they didn't vet them. They don't have any way to vet that many people that fast. And you can't vet in a culture like that. Or the Somalis. That'd be the only two populations that would be as bad as the Palestinians, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, don't forget we've got Syrians, they hate us, and Iranians certainly too. So that kind of opens up, a lot of the Middle East certainly. Yeah. But, back when Obama was in, they used to try to say that it was a 2-year process, to vet these people. And that's how good the vetting was. Well, that was shot down so many times. It wasn't a matter of us doing the vetting. We were talking about a lot of foreign agencies that work with, refugees and things like that, the NGOs that were doing the vetting. And so there was not a whole lot of trust there, especially, when everything went bad, when Biden was closing down and all, we had 13 soldiers killed in Afghanistan because of the way he withdrew. They just threw Afghanis on planes. Yep. And I understand, interpreters that worked with our guys over there. I understand that. And they probably were a lot more vetted than most of the people that were on those planes. 600 Afghanis were brought into Nashville. Where are they? Who are they? And what are they doing? And so I don't understand the attraction. Originally we had the largest Kurdish population in Nashville of any other city. So what's happening? Why are we bringing more and more into the city of Nashville? Not a fence around Nashville. They aren't going to stay in Nashville, obviously. They'll penetrate out into other counties and cities. But the whole thing is just not good. So what we've kind of done is we've compiled a list of Palestinian related and Palestinians themselves that are already here in our country. The majority that we're going to talk about are right here in Tennessee.
Some in Knoxville.
Well, you know what? Knoxville was ground zero for the Students of Justice in Palestine, which is one of the most radical, far left, anti-American, anti-Jew organizations on college campuses in this country. And that was founded in Knoxville. So, we want to talk about Knoxville. There's plenty of hatred to go around in Knoxville. But I think people forget, when we talk about back in 2009, we had Nidal Hassan, who was raised by Palestinian parents that came from the West Bank, which back then was politically ruled by the Hamas-supporting Palestinian Authority. And so, we know Hassan killed 13 soldiers and wounded dozens of others when he opened fire on Fort Hood. And so, there's a Palestinian connection. And of course, we forget about those things because they didn't happen yesterday. Then again, 2015, we had the Chattanooga shooter, the Chattanooga jihadist, Mohammed Youssef Abdulaziz, who gunned down 5 servicemen at an army recruiting station. He was raised and resided with his Palestinian Jordanian parents. And, there's another connection. So obviously he was Palestinian. One of the big problems that we have, a gentleman that lives in Nashville, is Dawood Abu Diab, who's a Palestinian who labels his birthplace as occupied Palestine. His parents and other relatives still live over there. He takes pride. We've talked about him before on various occasions. He was the founder of My Muslim Neighbor and the Faith and Culture Center in Nashville. His center joined leftist groups to support and to strategize a few years ago with Black Lives Matter. The same year, Black Lives Matter leaders traveled to what they called occupied Palestine, and announced their support for the BDS campaign against Israel, which is the boycott, divest, and sanction. Abu Diab also attended the U.S. Council on Muslim Organization conference, the first one that was held here in this country, which is Muslim Brotherhood. I think we forget about that. We've talked and written extensively, especially after we found a very good picture of Mr. Abu Diab at this conference.
Now, wasn't he involved with the formation of TIRC, Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights
Coalition? Yeah, he was
Coalition?
involved in that too,
Okay.
So, he's got his hand in a lot of different things. People love him. He's very popular with the Muslim community, but as well as the Jewish community, oddly enough. But he has something called our Muslim neighbor. And, he likes to bring the interfaith, I call it garbage, I'm sorry, but he's big into the interfaith stuff as well. So, but he's been around, and of late, we've had pictures of him, protesting along with others about Palestine and Gaza, and just there's that anti-American streak there, and I'm sure they would argue and say no, they're not anti-American, but when you're waving the flag of Palestine, you're against America.
You're not here to assimilate, which if you mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood, they make it clear in their explanatory memorandum that they're not here to assimilate.
The other thing that bothers me is that, I think Trump is doing an excellent job at rounding up the illegals, a lot of illegals, especially the criminal sects of illegals. And I think that's great. And I agree with you that I think we need to stop everybody from coming in here right now. I just think that I don't have a problem with a Muslim ban. I think that's one of the things that they do not assimilate when they come to this country. There's no such thing as assimilating. But I think we need to remember that Palestinians are not pro-America because we stand with Israel. And so when you stand with Israel, we're considered the enemy. So
let's not forget that all the Muslims over there consider America the big Satan and Israel the little Satan. And if I'm not mistaken, absolutely. The Palestinian areas, and Palestine is not a country, okay? The Hamas population over there, I think they were also celebrating on 9/11. I'm pretty sure I remember seeing that. And people seem to forget that. And does anybody not watch what's going on in Europe with Muslim immigrants from wherever, in whatever country they're in Europe, turning it to one big, well, I won't say that, just one big bad place, just one big no-go zone.
And that is very true, especially over in the UK, outside of London, there are surrounding areas, Sheffield, Manchester, Birmingham. They all have Muslim mayors. And so they're cooked over there. I mean, they've got, Sharia law, Sharia compliant neighborhoods. You can't walk in these neighborhoods with a cross around your neck, or women aren't allowed to go in these neighborhoods dressed a certain way. Yeah. So if you look at what's going on over in the UK, they're a little bit ahead of us, and we should be learning from that.
Well, all of Europe. All of Europe.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, like, Switzerland and Netherlands and things like that, they continue to have their problems. And the thing that bothers me here is we have allowed Hamas to not only grow, but to flourish. It's like we give them miracle grow because they're jumping up on more college campuses. We've got a kind of I don't know, not a CARE chapter here, but we do have AMAC, the American Muslim Advisory Council, that just might as well be a CARE,
Right.
affiliate, because they basically promote CARE. So we always say that they pretty much are CARE. But why are we not rounding up the members of Hamas? We know where they are. The executive director, Nihad Awad, was a co-conspirator in the largest terrorism financing trial in this country to date, down in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
And so while they were never indicted because Eric Holder didn't want them to be indicted, we've got a whole new bunch of people in. Let's go after Hamas and their affiliates in this country.
And the FBI used to know that Hamas was CARE.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think maybe with a new generation of FBI and CIA and all the other alphabet agencies, maybe we'll actually start getting the training and the schooling. We know that the FBI whitewashed, completely purged training of any kind that was offensive to Muslims. They brought Muslims in to say that's offensive. Well, of course they're going to say it's offensive because they don't want people, knowing about it. My own class that I used to teach in law enforcement when I first retired, it was a 3-day class, and it wasn't anti anything. It just was a 3-day class about, Middle Eastern crime culture and community. And CARE, of course, got involved. And because it was a government contract, it was chopped immediately. And so maybe these things are going to change, and I hope that they will change. But let me go back to a few more. I'd like to name drop a few more people if I can. We have a young woman by the name of Dana Swayze, a big pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas supporter, who's so hateful that she actually earned herself a profile on Canary Mission. Canary Mission is a wonderful website to go to if you're curious about who might be anti-American, pro-Hamas, pro any of the Muslim Brotherhood organizations. So again, it's Canary Mission. It's a wonderful website. It's got all kinds of information. But Miss Swayze actually worked for a dentist in Murfreesboro, while the whole time her profile is just pure venom against the USA and Israel and Jews. She has you can look up all the tweets that she has sent out from 2013, actually, all kinds of anti-Jewish, really, really nasty, hateful things. So she's on there. And then, like I said before, UTK was the ground zero there for Students for Justice in Palestine. And they have been, the vitriol that they have spread, they've attacked Jews on campus. We know that throughout this country, a lot of Jewish students have been threatened and beat up and ostracized on their own college campuses. So, again, this is not the way to have people that don't want to assimilate come into our country. And then one of the last things I wanted to mention was I want people to remember the American Muslim Advisory Council, AMAC, which is in Nashville. They have been a thorn in a lot of people's sides for a long time. They've grown. They started back in 2011, which was based on the anti-terrorism material support bill that Doug Matheny and Bill Ketron had first come up with.
And talk about that bill just a little bit. I mean, that bill basically was just that you could not hide behind your religion to support terrorism. Is that?
And who wouldn't want it? That's exactly what it was. And who wouldn't have wanted that?
Right.
But the Muslims in Nashville said, no, this is anti-Muslim. It had nothing to do with that. It was a very good bill, but they considered it very offensive, and so it was watered down. There is that bill in place, but it is watered down. It's not what it was meant to be. But you would think, well, that was a good idea, and why would they be against that? Not that they were pro-terrorism, but they weren't for the bill either.
I remember that bill. Matter of fact, me and a few others went up there, and we were like, I mean, that place was full. The Legislative Plaza was just full of Muslims. I mean, there was just a handful of non-Muslims there that day. We
Felt
were definitely
kind of funny, didn't it?
Yeah, but now the bill passed. Like you say, it was not what it was intended to be, but it was, you know, it was a decent bill. Better than nothing, that's for sure. But it's a shame too that, you know, we've had so many things happen, not just in our country. You know, well, we had 9/11. We've had this so-called war on terror. So, okay, terror is a tactic. That's all because the Bush administration did not want to name the enemy. I mean, I know you've seen that thing there where he's basically, soon after 9/11, he's standing there with Niwad and the other members of CARE and the other Muslim Brotherhood people, and standing there, and he's saying, you know, that Islam is a religion of peace, and the people that did this were not good Muslims, blah, 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 blah. And so then we declared a war on a tactic rather than, you know, most wars in the past, we understood the enemy's doctrine, and we taught our people the enemy's doctrine, you know, in the military. And I remember even in school, you know, we knew what the difference in communism was and our Constitution. And we knew that, hey, you know, those ideas are not compatible. Well, you've got a whole doctrine within Islam that's not compatible with our Constitution.
No, and in that document, you referenced it a little bit earlier, you know, the Muslim Brotherhood Manifesto. There's the technical name is a lot longer than that, the strategic goal for the group in North America.
Right.
That is on my website, and I just urge people all the time to go read that document. The first several pages are in Arabic. Skip over that, you know, because there is the English version right after the Arabic version. And it is amazing that they tell you, they outline perfectly what their plan is. And so from the organizations that are listed there, the top, you know, Muslim Brotherhood groups in America, they are here, they're large, they're very wealthy, they're funded very well. And, you know, they are growing. And instead of us looking at that list and saying, okay, they've got to go, we got to shut them down, we don't seem to be doing that. And you know, it isn't offensive. It isn't about Islam. It's about the terror organizations. And I've gotten away from calling it terrorism. It's now jihadi attacks. Right. It's jihad. And that is something that they outline in this document. So I think everybody should read that. And there's a slew of other documents. You know, it isn't just the Quran, it's the Hadith and the Sirah. There's so much more to it. And people say, I've read the Quran and I don't see anything wrong with it. Well, there's 109 verses, over 109 verses in the Quran that talk about killing, you know, non-believers. So, okay, right. You know, that's a problem. But back to AMAC, we know that there's another woman named Amira Sakala, and her comrade, Ashley Henderson, who I'm sure you remember from the Highlander Research Center, which is all communism.
Also outside of Knoxville.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, that peaceful Knoxville, you know. But they had a Attack Zionism event back in 2018 that AMAC's, at the time, she was one of the leaders, Zulfat Swara, who is now one of our the Nashville Metro City Council members. Zulfat has been pictured, and I've got the pictures on my website, big, huge pictures of her with Rashida Tlaib, who we know is an anti-American.
Also Palestinian, right?
Yeah, yes, she is. And Omar Suleiman, who, of course, is from Somalia. But Zulfat has said on many occasions that she is inspired by Rashida Tlaib and by Omar Suleiman for the work, you know, that they've done in Congress. But she leaves out, you know, the fact that they have come out, just the vitriol about anti-Jews, and she still stands with them, you know, and that's what amazes me. But then let's not forget who Zulfat's campaign, I just got to throw this in, her campaign treasurer, or her, you know, running for Metro all the time, is Samar Ali, whose father, Suhab Ali, from Waverly, Tennessee, is the board chair for the Jerusalem Fund. Yeah. And sometime, you know, maybe we'll get into the Jerusalem Fund. I know we have other
Well, just hit the highlights if you got time. If you can hit,
I do not have those, and they are not in my brain, Dave.
Okay. Okay.
My brain is bursting as it is. But
I got you.
I think something people should start reading about the Jerusalem Fund. On our website, we have plenty of information there about it. Yeah. It's another front, basically. They talk about educating people on the culture and, the background and the history of everything in Palestine, which doesn't exist. But it also is funding organizations that are not good. Yeah. So, and your head really could, I've told people before, don't get overwhelmed by this. Take it bit by bit and really learn about it and really understand it. And when you do understand it, it isn't about anti-anything. It's about understanding who our enemy is. And until we get back to defining who the enemy is, like you said, especially our military, the rules of engagement have got to change. We can't expect us to, be polite and non-offensive. War is war. I'm sorry. So the rules of engagement need to match the operation that we're there to do, and not worry about offending the community. Right. I do understand that there are times when you have to deal with the communities, and there is ways to deal with them and understand them. But, we're talking about an enemy who says that they are taking America from within. And they're doing a very good job, and we're not paying attention to that.
I want to bring up something. You mentioned Samar Ali a minute ago, just as a reminder for those who maybe have been following this for a while. So Samar Ali was hired during the Haslam administration to be the international director for economic development. And I'm not sure if she was hired by Bill Hagerty or if she was hired by Haslam, all the same, and they both approved. So when she was hired, she was an expert in Sharia compliant finance, which is basically just jihad with money. Now, I don't know that she was actually hired for that particular skill, but that was one that she possessed. Well, there was a big uproar about it, and there was a lot of pushback. I don't think she actually stayed in that position too long, but I do remember that people complaining about it. And Bill Hagerty at the time was the head of economic development for the state. And he basically, everybody complaining about her. It wasn't a word for word, but it was kind of like what Hillary said about the basket of deplorables. That's essentially the same attitude he had towards all the people complaining about Samar Ali. And it's like he just didn't, I don't know what it is with, the Haslam's from Knoxville as well, and he doesn't get it. I don't know what's in the water there. They just don't seem to get it on this stuff.
Well, I think, talking about her, I think her job was to promote the economy, and work on the economy, which includes obviously music, big pork products here in Tennessee, sausage and stuff. And being Sharia compliant did not fit with those type promotions. Yeah. They don't believe in music. I'm not talking secular here. I'm talking actual Muslims that follow Sharia law, and the majority of them do. And I've said before, if they profess the first Shahada, there is no God but Allah, Muhammad is the Prophet, that is the most unifying of all the pillars in Islam. Any sect will come together under the Shahada. And so that in and of itself should speak volumes to people, that they are together, that is something that brings them together. And so I think, it isn't bad to go and to read about anything that we've talked about. There's another document on the website, my website, dailyrollcall.com, called The Methodology of Dawah. And when you start reading this, they actually mock Christians. Yep. And this is going after Christians and the interfaith thing. Interfaith is one of probably the most dangerous things that Christians can be involved in. Certainly, if you look at it from a point of view, the 10 Commandments says you shall not, follow another God. When you're accepting of another God, like these interfaith people do, you're breaking one of the commandments. And You know, I don't.
That whole
want to get into
Abrahamic
that.
faith thing is a problem.
Yeah, absolutely it is. So, you know, people just remember that we have problems. We do have, you know, massive amount of problems with Palestinians right now, with the pro-Hamas, you know, pro-Palestine, all those protests. We shouldn't forget about them. They're still happening in some of the bigger cities. And so, you know, pay attention and maybe start thinking about contacting your elected officials and saying no. And, you know, my big question is all these young people that are doing all these violent protests, you know, why aren't they going home to fight? Why aren't they going back to Palestine? Why aren't they going there to fight for the land that they believe is occupied? You know, don't sit here and burn things and be hateful and kill people. Go there, you know, go home and support the cause.
But be a martyr there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but that's not part of the game plan. So, but I really do hope there's a change of heart. You know, especially with you know, Mr. Burchett. I really do hope. I was disappointed that he wasn't able to come on. I wanted to hear, you know, what he really thinks. And so, you know, he certainly can reach out to any of us, including you. I mean, we have the information. Our information is completely vetted before we put anything out. You know, and it's factual. We always have links to the facts somewhere in our articles. So there's no reason for any of our elected officials to be in the fog about any of this stuff. You know, it might be uncomfortable to them. Right. You know, but when the refugee stuff was going on a few years ago here in Tennessee, I did have some reach out to us and ask us what was what. And, you know, I considered that, you know, to be educational. And I thought that it was great that they were looking for the answers. And so, you know, we've got a lot of problems. And, you know, the NGOs that we have that have been helping and have been getting millions of dollars. I can't wait for the Catholic charities to explode. You know, I think that's going to be part of DOGE coming out with these NGOs and the money that has been funneled. I mean, we know our legislator gave Catholic Charities $7 million to begin with.
About 3 or 4 years ago. Yep, absolutely. That's ridiculous that they did that because they know they're responsible for not only supporting the refugees, but at that time they were helping bringing over illegals. And that was known.
They still are. You know, I remember at the time Rick Womack had talked about, he was a pilot for American Airlines, and he was actually having to fly a lot of these refugees into Tennessee. And, you know, the buses would pick them up. It would be Catholic Charities and some of, you know, bridge from Eastern Tennessee, Knoxville, if you will. So, you know, there's a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge about these things. And I think that our elected officials need to stop being egotistical and start learning about stuff, you know?
Well, and the FBI used to know some of this because, like I say, and like you're talking about the case in 2007, 2008, the Holy Land Foundation trial, when our FBI said, CARE is Hamas. Hamas is a designated terror group. As far as I know, they still are. We're acting like they're not.
Yes, they are.
But it's frustrating to me that after all this time and all that's happened, that we don't get it as a country, and our elected officials especially seem to not get it. I don't understand that, but I'm hoping that we'll get some people in there under this new administration that do get it, and they train up our FBI or whatever. I think they may have to take that organization to ground and start over, but whatever, and actually train them, because these are threats. You have to understand your enemy. You know, if you don't know your enemy, you can't beat your enemy. And it's their ideology. Just like the communists had an ideology, Islamists have an ideology. Now look, if they want to pray 5 times a day, that's their business. If they want to believe in a false god, that's their business. We're not talking about per se the religious aspect of it, but it's a religious, political, and a social. It's all in one. It's you know, political, military, and a religion all wrapped in one. There's no separation for them. And there's it's a dangerous ideology, and people need to recognize that. I understand it's a religion. We can't outlaw a religion in this country. I'm not suggesting that, but there's no reason for being ignorant about it. Okay.
Yeah.
If you think about the things we teach our kids about, and we hope that, some cases, especially where they have really bad problems, we teach parents what to look out for with gang activity.
That's right.
And drug activity and so on and so forth. Well, why wouldn't we, let them know, hey, look, here's the doctrine of this group. Because, they've got a violent history, like 1,400 years worth.
That's right.
And millions dead. So it's just crazy to me that we're still as ignorant as a country, at least in our, at least when it comes to the government, as we are about this.
And it's really sad because there's in this day and age, there's no reason, for that to be the case. There's plenty of information, good information. And, when we talk about that manifesto from the Muslim Brotherhood, that has evidentiary value. That document was actually placed into evidence in that trial. And so, that seems to have kind of gone by the wayside. That's a gold mine for law enforcement.
It could be revived, right? It could be revived.
Yeah,
they can still prosecute.
Absolutely. And so it's, we do have an attorney general now that I believe would have the gumption to go after. Back at the time, it was Eric Holder and Obama. So, that wasn't about to happen. But it's scary to know that nobody back in the last few administrations is paying attention. And like you said, I hope that President Trump, I hope that he has people that know about this. If they don't know, they need to know, and stop being, purging our training for military and law enforcement has got to stop, and it wasn't anything bad. It certainly wasn't against a religious thing. It was factual information of, like in my class, it was what to look for when you go in stores, how to how to understand the naming conventions of Muslims, things that were useful. It wasn't anything about hate or anti-Muslim. And I think that's the fear. I think so many of these agencies at the time feared, oh my God, we can't go make an arrest in a mosque. We're going to get sued and this and that. No, it's time to change the game plan. And I think we're headed in that right direction, but I think we'll see. Yeah. I think it's going to be time and we'll find out.
A little concerned too, because, we had the New Year's Day incident in New Orleans, and you've heard nothing about it. We did a show on that just a few weeks ago with you and Chris Holton, and nothing else. It's just like it went down a black hole somewhere. So,
well, and that's usually the case. We didn't read about, the Chattanooga guy there, Abdulaziz. You don't read about them until it's months or sometimes years later, usually on the back page of an old newspaper. And the scary part about him is he had been in our backyard, basically. He was attending a mosque in Franklin, Tennessee. And he had been visiting, there was a recruiting station right in that plaza. So, these characters are in our neighborhoods, they're in our communities. And, of course, they're charismatic people, they're religious people, but they're also of the mindset that Allah wants them to kill for the sake of Islam.
Yeah, either convert or die you can sum it up with convert, die, or accept being a dhimmi, accept being a second-class citizen. That's pretty much the goal. I think our dear friend and my mentor, Bill Warner, had said it correctly, and it often struck me that he said, if you understand Muhammad, you'll understand Islam. And so, I urge people to read about Muhammad, read about who he was and what he was like. He started off peaceful, and then turned against that and became violent. And that's where Islam is now. And people like to say, well, Christianity used to kill people, too. It's all in the context,
it's not the same. The way Islam is, it's a
To do the things that you do, and the things that Muslims do are in obedience to their doctrine. For Christians to do those things would be in disobedience to Christian doctrine.
Right. And so, I think people just need to read some of these documents, to read some of these books, and understand. And right now I understand people are very overwhelmed with all the crap that's going on. I think we're going to start to see a lot of that disappear. I think the school issues, with the transgender movement and the LGBT whatever movement, I think things are going to start to finally get squared away in our schools. So I think, parents, I'd like to see, certainly look at the textbooks.
Yeah.
We had problems a few years ago with the amount of Islam over Christianity and Judaism, 16 pages compared to 3 pages, in history books and things like that. So people need to just pay attention all over the place. But I think once we start getting squared away in this country, and I think we're on the right road, I think it'll be a lot easier for people to pick a topic and focus on it, research it, vet your information, and expose what you can.
Yeah.
And
now you have a book.
We'll get somewhere.
Your book is still advertised on your website, right?
Yes, it is. It's The Threat in Your Backyard, Our Own Backyard, and it's a very easy read. It's not very, very big, but it is very factual, and I've gotten great reviews. The reviews that are there are all 4 and 5 star. I think I only had 1 4-star, and that was Louis Johnson, if you remember Louis Johnson. So that wasn't a surprise, but the rest of them are 5 stars. You can read it in one night, and it has a lot of information about Tennessee. Pretty much stayed within Tennessee, but there are the documents attached to that. So I hope that people can utilize that. I've tried working on book number 2, Dave. Forget it. My brain is mush. It just isn't coming like that.
Especially where Tennessee is concerned, because I've been on your website, and anybody has all they need to know about the Muslim threat in Tennessee, the Muslim organizations in Tennessee, who, what, when, it's all there. So your website's a great resource. Your book's a great book, short, easy to read. And now we did for the article you were reading from tonight is from Daily Roll Call. Pat Hamza wrote it, and we posted it on our website, and actually posted one that was done a couple of weeks ago, because just a few weeks ago, the Homeland Security one of the committees from Homeland Security did a threat analysis, and it included Tennessee, and it included information on these different jihadi groups. So that's on your website. We also put it on our website, and those are good articles for people to read. Yeah, and it's in the description of this video as well. So anyhow, any closing thoughts?
Oh gosh, no. It just, anytime I get to talk about this, and I do wish that people would reach out to your elected officials, talk to them about this. The Palestinians coming to Tennessee or America is not a good idea. Let's get ourselves together first before we continue to bring more people into our country. Yeah. Certainly those constituents of, Mr. Burchett out in Knoxville, please reach out to him and just say, no, this isn't a good time for this. This is not smart. If they're not assimilating into our country, which they are not, let's leave it at that for now. So that's pretty much what I'd like people to do.
I think we'll actually end up being okay on that, because I don't think anybody's going to take the people from there. The other Middle Eastern countries don't even want them. Egypt doesn't want them. Jordan doesn't want them. Nobody wants them. So I don't think that it'll actually come to fruition, but the idea that we would want or accept them is scary, very concerning. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but definitely want to get the word out that that's not a population that we need to be importing into Tennessee. Hey, thanks for coming on, especially short notice, and thanks for all you do. Definitely have you back. I'll have some event announcements and information about our guests next week in just a few minutes. Thank you all for taking the time to watch our program tonight. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons as well as the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, tninformer.com. Please find and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Now, a couple of things here. We are, as I said at the beginning of the show, going to try and get Representative Burchett on the show when his schedule allows it. He had something come up, couldn't be here, but I do appreciate Kathy coming on real short notice. Nullification. The bill has a new number. This is at the state level. House Bill 0441 is sponsored by Representative Bud Halsey. And this is a nullification process bill. It's, different ways that our state can move towards nullification if needed. And I would say it's probably overdue for a lot of things anyway. And the Senate version is SB 0479, sponsored by Senator Bowling. No schedule yet for either one of them in the committee. That will probably come out this week, and we'll let you know about it. If you want to know more about nullification in general, visit tncss.weebly.com. And you could also sign up for the Substack there from TNCSS, get weekly updates. Karen does a really good job with that. Our guest for our second show tonight, starting at 8:30 this evening, will be Representative Jody Barrett. We'll get some insight to some legislation he's proposing for the upcoming session. Next week, our guest will be Professor Jeffrey Adicott from St. Mary's University in Texas, here to discuss his books about Union terror, tactics used by the Union during the Civil War and the Confederate response. Tune in for some real history. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.